G'day everyone, I'm Ben Kingsley. This is Evan Lucas, and we're delighted to be here tonight on this YouTube live, aren't we, Evan?
We are indeed. And look, thank you so much for joining you. What we're going to say before we start, this is an interactive webinar. So please jump on the chat, put in your questions. We will answer as many of them as we can, because tonight is about learning. It's all about understanding not just how your overall wealth is, but how to use the Moorr platform to the best of your ability to get the maximum out of how it will actually improve your overall wealth position and the financial security you're looking for.
100%, Evan. And so, yeah, tell us why you are joining tonight. I mean, is it a new year, new you moment where you're looking to look at a money management system?
Which is what we pulled this for, which is obviously new year.
Yeah, absolutely.
More money, because that's what we're here for, right? We are aspirational people. We are here to talk about aspiration, and that's actually a good thing, and how an automated app like Moorr can actually improve everything that you do with your habits around money, with your behavior to what you then do out in the real world, because that's what you're here for, right? Like a New Year resolution.
Yeah.
If you can improve your behavior with something like, I don't know, your diet, why wouldn't you also do it with your finances?
100%. So tell us in the chat what you're thinking, and we're going to be talking about how to master your finances with Moorr. We're going to be obviously introducing the way in which you can set up your MoneySMARTS, which is our most popular tool inside the Moorr platform. So what do you reckon? Let's jump in.
Let's get in.
Here we go. So it's going to be in two parts tonight. The first thing we're going to be covering off on is, why are you doing this? Okay, so we're going to be talking about financial security. We're going to be focusing on effective and conscious, or conscientious in a way, money management as being the right formula. We're also going to be talking about where most folks get it wrong. And then we're going to be talking about this transformational impact of being able to get it right. So that's part one. So we're going to set the scene. It's almost like saying, here's the problem and a bit of an opportunity and potential in there as well. And then we're going to move into section two, which is introducing the Moorr platform. How do you set up your Moorr account, and then getting started? So onboarding, thinking about all of the financial numbers we need to put in there, and then setting the MoneySMARTS settings associated with those cards. And then what's next as part of that story, we'll do a bit of a demo. And then we're going into a Q&A section. And if you hang around to the end,
you get some free stuff.
You get some free stuff from us. So we can't wait for that. So let's roll in, because ultimately there's a big question here, isn't there? Mm-hmm. In terms of what is it, the one thing that you want.
And so why we start with this is because, like anything, you've come to us for a reason. You want something, and the want is what drives us to do everything. And that one thing that you want, we know from all the studies, is, as Ben said at the open of this for part one, you want financial security. That's what you're doing this for. You are setting yourself, your family, you and your partner, whatever the machination is of your scenario is, that's what you're here to do. That's why you're here to look at this scenario, and what we're here to sort of help you get those, not just processes, but also the bedrock in place, because that's what it's for.
All of the people who fill in the survey, the discovery survey, and talk about what money means to them, financial security is the number one thing. Mm-hmm. And when you think about financial security, it also means you're getting freedom of your time and freedom of not having to worry about money, which is one of the biggest anxiety pressures that we see around that. So that is it. So it's this financial security story. So what is financial security? So what does it look like? Number one, it's obviously when we're working for that, we're earning a steady and consistent income. Okay, that is definitely part of that. And we want to build that up. And then ultimately in retirement, we want to have a nest egg enough to also provide that steady income for us to allow us to enjoy life in retirement. Second part of that is the emergency fund. Okay, so when you are thinking about financial security, you can't do that if you're living paycheck to paycheck. Yep. If you haven't put any funds away to basically look after yourself and protect yourself. The third area we want to talk about is the ability to manage those debt levels. Like ultimately, we will get into debt. The vast majority, if we're going to buy a home, if we're going to potentially look to invest, we may do that with some leveraged investment as well. And then finally, we're talking about building that adequate asset base, because ultimately, as we build that asset base, that can be in our family home, but it can also be in some of the other investments that we get there.
And on these three areas, because I'll come to the passive income at the end, they can be really scary, particularly the middle two, the emergency fund and the debt levels. Because when you have an emergency fund, that term immediately brings loss into your thought process, and debt also brings it into it. With debt, you need to also remember what debt is. The way I've always explained it, debt is like a power tool. If you use it right, you can build something really quickly. If you use it wrong, unfortunately, you can cut your fingers off. Debt is absolutely manageable. And if you look at it as a tool, it will change the way you think about it. Rather than being a burden, it's actually a helper, and helped in the right way. Again, it's a power enhancer, power tool, whatever it is. Because once you get that, it builds the last one.
It's a productive element.
Yeah.
As opposed to if it's managed the wrong way, it's a destructive element.
Yeah.
To your point. So I think that's really helpful.
And what we'll go through in this, the whole webinar is about making sure that every single dollar that you have is working for you. That's what the emergency fund is. That emergency fund is not sitting there idle. It's working for you. And it's giving you that thing at the end, which is passive income above and beyond that horrible rainy day situation that we hope you don't have to use, of what it's also there doing to do.
So that is what it is. Okay. So that's ultimately the prize of climbing that mountain in terms of being able to get there. But why does it matter? Well, ultimately the research is really clear in the ways in which it impacts us. And so one of those is obviously it all shows up in behavioral around reducing stress and anxiety. When we don't have enough money to cover the bills, when we don't have enough money to look after ourselves or to, plan for that rainy day, our stress levels rise. It also puts a lot of pressure on the relationships. And we see, obviously, it's one of the top 3 reasons why relationships break down as part of that.
In fact, in the last survey of the last 6 months, it hit the top. So
there we go.
Financial infidelity or financial stress is now the number 1 cause of breakdowns in relationships, because all that it's concentrating, all of your time, all of your effort, all of your overall mind power is going to this one extremely, corrosive part of your environment. And therefore the relationship goes away.
It's problematic. And of course, if we're feeling that level of stress, we're not making smart decisions. And that's number 2. When you actually do have financial security, it allows you to make smarter decisions. You're not making these non-survival mode decisions. You're actually starting to think and plan ahead in terms of what you're going to do with those earnings and that money that you're getting from the wages that you earn. It obviously then naturally allows to support personal and life goals. The big thing that we're about. I mean, at the end of the day, we're here because we want to serve aspirational Australians. And it's those aspirational Australians who want to start hitting those milestones.
And so life goals, this needs to be highlighted. There needs to be pointed out there's a difference between wealth and rich, right? Wealth gives you the ability to do what you want, when you want, how you want. That's a life goal. If it is that, you want to have the ability to go, and we'll show this in the designs later, on an overseas holiday once a year, that's a life goal, and your wealth gives you that. You don't have to be mega rich to do that, because that's not what your goal is. Your goal is to have an experience once a year, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Rich in experiences, not necessarily rich in monetary value is what we're about. So I think, and that obviously direct links into happiness measurements that they've also done those studies. Obviously provides a safety net. We've really forced that messaging in terms of what we're talking about. It boosts confidence. And obviously, there's less constrained by financial limitations. So the beautiful thing about building or planting a tree today is it builds up and it provides that shade over time. That's what happens. A lot of people want instant gratification. Finances and building wealth doesn't happen instantly for the vast majority of us. And we're not chasing that lotto win. We're basically chasing that methodical way in which we're going to build that out and have some of that balance between delayed gratification and that lifestyle by design now.
And the other way to look at it is that confidence comes from abundance. And the more abundance you have, the more confidence you get.
Yeah, great.
So
point.
As you keep building, you will realize that actually I've got more wealth than I realized. My safety net is getting bigger.
Yeah.
The abundance of materials that I have is growing. And the confidence that gives you from the first point around anxiety to that fifth point, is incredible. That change in your overall thinking about your money, realistically your wealth, will be absolutely life-changing.
I really like that messaging. It improves relationships, the one we talked about earlier. We do not want relationships broken down because of money stresses. Ultimately, it is about sitting down, planning, thinking about those types of things. In terms of control and peace of mind. This also shows up in the research. A lot of my own personal observations in looking after thousands of clients and through the advisory business that we run is this idea of money controlling people versus you controlling money. It is the most empowering sort of outcome that you get from that in regards to knowing that you're actually in control of it and it's not going to dictate terms to you. To do that, though, you do need to make smarter decisions and more measured and planned out decisions rather than impulsive decisions that might draw down all of that income and that cash flow that we're earning.
So that's a little bit of discipline.
Yeah.
And it changes some habits.
100%. And why is that important, mate?
Why is that important? So this line here is what this whole concept's about. You can't run a marathon without being in the habit of running, just as you can't have wealth without being in the habit of creating wealth.
Yeah.
Ben and I have just outlaid everything around that whole concept about the things that you need to do, the processes you need to put in place, and don't expect your wealth to be something that happens overnight. You can't walk out your front door, stick on your sneakers, and run 42Ks. You just can't. It takes years, probably for most people, to get to that level. Your wealth's exactly the same. Now, you can use whatever metaphor you want. It doesn't have to be running or a marathon, dieting, budgeting. It doesn't matter. The one that matters is that second line. Understand that you are now on your journey to create wealth, and that wealth is specific to you, but it does therefore create a scenario where you need to get the habits in check to make that wealth happen.
Now, the best part about that is through all of the research and the way in which we've helped thousands and thousands of clients and the tens of thousands of people who use the Moorr platform now, is that we're going to share what is effective and conscientious in regards to that type of story, right? So, that consciousness around your money management is going to be really important. So this is the right formula as far as we're concerned, and we want to share that with you. And that is balancing today's spending against those future needs and wants. And it should always be future needs first, then wants later on. But that is technically lifestyle by design. Then we want to be talking about building a process, a systems, those habits and behaviors. A lot of this is about building routine, and from that comes the confidence associated with that. So that is by far the most important thing. I was on a recent podcast where someone asked me, what's your big tip for the year? And I said, well, this is simple. Set an annual surplus target. And they went, well, that's interesting. Like most people basically talk about, giving me a little tip about what to do at a grocery store. No. The best way to get started is plan out 12 months and say, okay, we want to hit $50,000 in savings or $20,000 in savings, or if you're, just starting out, maybe $5,000 in savings. That is the annual surplus. And then you build on that year on year on year. And it's that little things that build up, what we were saying before, from little things, big things grow. So that then builds on managing money in and managing money out. And then making sure that, every dollar, and you mentioned this earlier at the start in the intro, every dollar has been allocated a job. So even if I haven't earned that dollar yet, say we're now here in January in recording, but let's say, I'm expecting to get paid in March, I'm expecting to get paid in September. So by planning out that money that's coming in and then planning that money that's going out, that's where most people fail with budgets, because they don't really understand the minutia and all of the moving. And that's what we're going to unpack in our demos later tonight as part of that story.
Just to jump in on that, I am seeing, we love it. Let us know what you think in the chat. Please put them in there. Are seeing questions coming through. A lot of them are questions that we'll cover up in part 2. So I do apologize. There's at least 3 or 4 questions that are about that. We will get to them. I do, and Ben and I are seeing them, but they are questions that will come pretty much in it. And I need to sort of say that very clearly, because I know you're waiting and I can see you there. Because please let us know, give us a like as well. Taking on from what Ben's also just spoken about there is that lifestyle by design, the habits that come with all of that overall. Don't forget, the other thing about a budget, it's only as good as the plan that you have. And budgets, the issues that can come with budgets is that they have a finite time and then they start again. What we're trying to do here with Moorr is that your budget is ongoing. It is malleable in terms of what I mean by that. It is not overspending. It is understanding that your changes in your habits will change more than just your budget will in an
Think of that snowball just getting bigger and bigger as it's rolling down the hill.
So if you have a budget, the ability to stick to it's quite high. But if you have a budget that's actually more of a plan that actually can flex with the changes that happen and the snowball that comes from that.
Yeah, that's
really what you want.
That's exactly right. And it's building those habits and behaviors over time and let time do the heavy lifting. So when we get our home or when we get our investment property or as we start building that up, or we might even be investing in shares in terms of ETFs and just watching that momentum build up. But we also wanted to start with savings goals, so to build up the deposit for that future home or whatever that looks like, because there really is sort of three things that we have a massive vision of being able to do. And that is, we want to save you time. We want to save you money. And then with that surplus money that you've trapped, we need to put it to work and put that work to basically make you more money from that. That's the science of wealth creation.
Yeah.
It's not anything further than that it's not rocket science in terms of what that story
and
looks
it's
like.
why Einstein's credited with saying that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. And it's exactly what Ben just said, that your emergency fund, every single dollar that you have is working for you, whether that's in an offset account. We'll come to how that gets calculated in more at the end, whether that's sitting in a deposit account that's building up for you to get your deposit for the property that you've wanted. Your money's always working for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Because don't forget, working is not going to get you to where you want.
That's right.
Making your money work is the only way you're going to do it.
And they're going to be derailers, right? And this is where we wanted to make sure that where most people get it wrong, we want to talk about these derailers, because plenty of people struggle with money management. Plenty of people don't get to the goals, personal and financial goals that they want to do. So these are some of those things. So first one, upfront dismissal or those excuses. And we're being frank here. Ultimately we're having, that sort of tough conversation to some people saying, well, what are they? Well, first of all, they say, oh, look, I just lack the understanding. I don't really know. It's too complex for me. It's the whole financial literacy thing. I just put it in the too hard basket, right? Because of that. Now, what we're going to demonstrate to you tonight, anyone can use, whether you're 16 or 106, the systems and the technology doing all the work in the back end, doing all of those calculations, doing everything for you, will prove to you that actually it is simple and it is easy to actually operate. Then there's the psychological or, those behavioral barriers. So just because you may have grown up in a household that didn't manage their money well and it was pressure on those, so don't repeat what you've already learned. It's trying to change those behaviors. Or if an event's occurred to you and ultimately, it's knocked the confidence out of you and psychologically you don't know how to get back, just baby steps. Break down the bigger goals into smaller goals and start working on those sorts of stories. Then it is obviously the lack of time and preparation. So this is prioritization. So this is a bit of an excuse. It's like, I just can't find the time to do it. Well,
they all are, right? So every single one of these points, and there's still points to come, points to, and again, excuse the pun on this, that at the moment, the way people look at their finances is that you're about to see it in front of your face.
Yeah.
You're about to see what you've probably, inverted commas, as Ben's highlighted here on the show, done wrong.
Yep.
Nobody wants to see wrong. Not only that, nobody wants to actually have something illustrate to them loss. And loss aversion is one of the biggest psychological barriers in all over finances. It's why the person that actually coined it, which is Daniel Kahneman, won the Nobel Prize when he actually presented this whole concept, is that he knows that inaction and no action is as bad for your finances as taking risk. Because at least with risk, you can mitigate things and you can grow. Inaction means that every single day that goes by, you don't get the eighth wonder of the world. Inaction also means that you are continuing to do the habits that Ben just talked about that are actually detrimental to your overall position.
Now, Evan, a lot of the conversations I've had years and years ago with a lot of people, they talked about this one, which was the inconsistency. Oh, my income fluctuates. I've got commissions. I work part-time. I'm a gig economy worker. And so I've got all of those things. That shouldn't be a barrier. What we should be doing is looking at previous performance.
Bigger picture.
Yeah, just look at a previous performance for the last maybe 2 years, roughly what you earned during that period. Use that as a baseline. Anything you get above that, guess what? straight to the annual surplus, bottom line.
Yeah, and you will know what you're going to make for the year. Yeah, you may not get paid until every 90 days or every 120 days. It doesn't matter. If you know what you're going to make for the year, that money's going to come.
Yep.
It doesn't matter when it comes, it's coming.
Yeah. But just accommodate for 80% of it and assume 20% is at risk.
Yeah.
And if you do get that 20%, that's great. It's still, you can still do this. So that shouldn't be an excuse.
I love this
Obviously, skepticism and mistrust. Yeah, I can understand that. You know, we have the news feeds about all of these people are being scammed, and
money's the root of all evil.
Yeah, you know,
I mean, that's what a lot of you are coming from, right? There's Australian mindset, right? That, you know, tall poppy syndrome. That's the skepticism that we're talking about here, the mistrust. Money is something that we shouldn't celebrate. Aspiration of growing our wealth is not something that we should celebrate. That is a horrible place to come from. And that's skepticism, because that's this whole idea that I've seen mistrust. Ben said, people losing money, X, Y, Z, people have done this. I can never get back onto the level. That's from a start point that is baked into our culture.
And it's really disappointing, right? Because ultimately we do want aspiration. We do want to work hard, and we do want to be rewarded for that. And in some respects, we want to be celebrated to a point, but it's not about what our peers think. It's about what that money will do for you in terms of buying your freedom of time as well as your peace of mind. So you really need to move through that. And fortunately enough, there's enough aspiring Australians out there who do believe in the fact that if I work hard and if I'm smart with my money, eventually I'll create a comfortable, if not a very, very clear area of financial peace for me and my family. And I think that should be celebrated to a point. It's not about, you know, showing off your wares and your wealth. It's just about making sure that you can have great memories and experiences with those around you that you care about. Then obviously the next one is lack of immediate reward. So this one is hard. It's like, I've been to the gym for a week. Why aren't I, you know, healthy, right?
Yeah.
You know, it just takes time.
Well, not only that, I've been to the gym for 4 weeks and I'm still not seeing the benefits.
Yes, that's right.
Right. In fact, if anything, I'm going backwards. I'm feeling sore. I'm feeling hard. You know, the first 4, 5, probably 6 months of your wealth journey.
Correct.
It's the same principle. You will feel like you are getting nowhere. And that is a human problem that we get. We are geared for instant gratification.
We are.
And we live in a delayed return environment. It's the world we now live in. We aren't Neanderthals anymore. We don't just eat, sleep, and drink. We have everything else in our lifestyle.
Yeah.
And that's a delayed return. I mean, think about it this way. What you're doing tomorrow, you're planning for that. And that planning is normally something that we don't do. So that's instant gratification that you could go out and get yourself a chocolate bar today. Whereas you're thinking about it tomorrow, that's forward planning. That's delayed gratification. It's the same thing with your wealth. Okay,
then obviously, again, past negative experiences. I tried this thing. I tried to save. I couldn't, so I'm just giving up on it. Or I did save, and then I put some money into an investment that someone said was a good idea or a sure thing, you know, or too good to be true, as we normally would say. And then so I've lost that motivation and momentum because it took me so hard to get to that. Well, you really can't be thinking like that, because ultimately, you know, you only have the one life, and you want to try and get the best out of it that you possibly can as part of that story.
You know, Ben and I are sitting here. We need to be honest as well. So, for instance, let me give you an own personal example. I've had a negative experience. I have bought a property scenario that didn't work for me. Now, it took my wife a little bit of time to get over that, but we have, and we've now moved forward. Negative experiences are going to happen. Negative impacts on your wealth are going to happen. Nothing in life is linear. Don't forget that negative experiences will happen. They can't get in your way of your ultimate goal of climbing the wealth mountain.
Negative experience should be learning experiences just as much as they are, and hopefully
even people of our, you know, experience have negative experiences, make mistakes, but we don't let the mistakes stop us from our ultimate goal.
Beautiful. And then obviously there's perception of inadequate income. I don't have enough. Why should I do this? Why should I actually even start? My income's not enough. I'm literally living from paycheck to paycheck. Well, that is then about what you are spending from an essential versus discretionary area. So I think that there is something, you know, I have this genuine belief that every Australian has the opportunity to craft out over 20, 30, 40 years a financial position that will make them comfortable in retirement.
discipline, habit.
Correct. That's all we need to be thinking about, and delayed gratification as part of that particular story. Okay, so if we're talking about that, these are the impacts. If you're not planning or taking action, then ultimately this is how it's going to play out. There's going to be too much lifestyle spending. So this is what we see in terms of those people who are failing. I just mentioned it a second ago. So they're spending more today and they're not putting anything away later. And it is harder to play catch up later. Compounding interest, as we know, we've talked about this many times, the bulk of Warren Buffett's profits and wealth have come in the last 30 years of his life, not in the first 60 years of his life in terms of what that looks like. Okay, they don't plan far enough ahead. So we are focusing really on just 12 months in terms of teaching you the beginner's guide to Money Smarts, but it will build, and you'll start to think about, say, 3-year savings plan for that deposit for the home, or what that big wedding is going to look like, or in our case, if you're our age, an investment or some significant investment, such as an investment property as part of that particular story. Poor decision making. This one shows up like this: unbudgeted for or unestimated costs up front and ongoing. So what we're talking about here is, okay, well, I've done my plan, and then all of a sudden someone says, hey, Ben, let's jump on a plane and go to Hamilton Island for a week. Okay, well, I've already got my budget and paid for my other holiday, but why not?
Sounds fun.
What's 10 grand over a week, to spend at Hamilton Island, whatever. So all of a sudden that's a one-off cost, or it could be ongoing costs. Some of those ongoing costs can look like, owning a pet, and not thinking about the veterinarian costs and all those other costs associated with that. Then you've got poor timing and prioritization. So are you sequencing them in the right order? So you act on impulse, without sort of that grasping the full financial impact of that. And sometimes this is a difficult one, right? Because if we're doing something where we're starting a family, whilst we might be renting, or we might still be in our first home, but it's a flat, we've got to think about where we want to be in that 3 to 5 year period. Because in some cases, let's say we are renting and we don't have an asset base in behind us, that can limit our opportunity, because those costs of having children can also then impact that future ability to be able to build assets and wealth off the back of that. So the net result of that is obviously very high probability of this, and that is failing to achieve financial security, what we're here to do, what we're here to teach, and then obviously not living your lifestyle by design, which is really your best life. That we're trying to teach you that there is an opportunity there, but the best life does get balancing that right or wrong out. So if you do get it right, this is what the results look like. So if we think about, the very, very difficult thing, and obviously those most vulnerable in our community, they really do struggle to keep above that sort of poverty line. Then you move into what we call modest lifestyle. Now, modest lifestyle, in between that poverty line and modest lifestyle, is a pension. And so if we're going to be living off a pension, we all see the stories, we all read the stories, we all see the shows on the 7:30 program or Current Affair, whatever it is, where people are battling, they're doing it tough, they're living on crackers and toasted sandwiches or whatever. They just don't have enough money to cover their living costs. That's not where we want to be. But we need to be able to build up off the back of that. That then moves us into what we call a comfortable lifestyle. Comfortable lifestyle means choices. So it means, yes, I might be able to upgrade the car. It might mean we might be able to go, for a domestic holiday or 2 a year, a drive holiday, but still we've got some comfortableness, but there's still some constraint, and there's still some decisions that we need to make in terms of not burning all of that retirement money. And then financial piece is basically getting to a level where really, in most cases, you can say yes to most things. It's not necessarily saying yes to a first-class flight to Europe and then $100,000 a night hotel room, but you know where I'm going with that.
Yeah, and I think it's not yes to all things. It's the choice to do what you want and how you want.
When you want.
And so that, as I said before, wealth and rich are not the same thing. That's what this, and why this chart, or why this, infographic is designed in a way that is a little bit bumpy, because it'll be different for all of you. But financial peace and lifestyle by design is to actually have the ability to say, actually, I don't want to because I've got something better to do.
Yeah.
So that's also part of it. It's not just yes to everything. It's actually sitting there going, no, I don't see the value in that.
Well, so, if someone said, Ben, let's go and have a look at this archaeological dig.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and I'm dusting, dirt off it. Now, that'd be interesting for about an hour or two, like incredible for some, but would I spend the next 3 months doing that?
Yeah.
Probably not. But for others, wow, that would be their dream job.
Yeah. And also what Ben's highlighting there is that you no longer have that anxiety. You have that confidence in your money, and you have the ability to make choice that is just basically comes to you ad hoc. You don't have to actually go, my choice right now, what's it going to do in 10 years' time? You've made those choices. That's what today is for. Today is here to put those things in place, the choice that you need to make, so that when you get to that point of lifestyle by design, the choices that you're making are coming to you ad hoc, and you get the ability to turn around and say, yep, I am going to go on that European holiday, or actually, I think I've got better things to do.
And just like in business, we are talking about running your finances. And so in businesses are successful on a couple of things. They're trade-offs and the judgment calls. So what are we going to be doing, which is what we're saying, what am I in for and what I'm not for? So that is those judgment calls and those trade-offs. And that is the decision. Because if someone did come along to you and say, this weekend is a trip of a lifetime and I haven't budgeted for it, but I honestly think that this is an experience that will last me a lifetime, I'm in. And I will then adjust my budget accordingly.
So that, therefore, is what we're trying to say here, probably a little bit roundabout, value. What do you value the most? Because again, when you get to this point, you'll actually work out that the value of things will change for you in much, much more beneficial ways. Exactly that point. If you want to go on a 8-month around the Australia coast trip with 2 kids and your partner, you can do that. You could literally
sign
pack it up. And so that's value, because that experience will be etched in your mind and will be rolled gold for life. No matter how much money you have, the experience that brings and the value that gives you internally for the life that you've had will be more than any value of a piece of currency, piece of paper.
100%.
But that's what this is. That's what we're trying to say to you, is that it's not about having the physical capital. It's about having the ability to do what you want when you want, with the lifestyle that Ben's been describing, that you can do what Ben wants to do. Or, for instance, for me, for some reason, I would love to one day just have the ability to move in and out of different cities.
Cool.
And that's what I'd love to be able to do. Just go, today I'm going to go up to Sydney. Tomorrow I'm going to jump over to Perth, or, even go over to Auckland or somewhere like that.
Where's the weather good today? I'm just going to jump on a plane and chase the sun.
And it doesn't have to be an expensive thing. I don't have to go business or first class. It's just the ability to go, actually, today I want to go and do this.
All right. So we're going to give you some tools. We're going to give you access to Moorr now, and we're going to give you some tools for the job. So we believe that the Moorr platform is the perfect partner for your future success. And that's how we've been building it. It's been built by subject matter experts who do this in their day job, in terms of looking after households and taking them on financial transformation journeys. So as part of that, these are the sort of core principles that we focus on. We've got the lifestyle area, right, which is about goal setting, all the stuff we've been talking about. What's the trade-off? What's in and what's out? What's the judgment call that I'm going to make around that type of spend or not spend? Save or spend is part of building out those goal setting principles. But with that, personal and financial goals, we need to understand and master the money piece. All right. And MoneySMARTS is a very powerful tool. It's very simple and easy to operate. And that's what we're going to unpack in this presentation. Then there's the property story here. And if it's my backstory that you have a bit of an understanding of, building multi-million-dollar property portfolio, and then also helping others do that through my day-to-day job, I've got a real big focus in terms of managing the home front and the costs associated with that. But also, when you're owning a couple of investment properties, there are holding costs, and there's tracking those costs. There's tax that I have to think about. There's all of those sorts of things that need to come. So we've got a component built in, and we continue to keep building out that. And of course, all roads lead to the wealth accumulation story. So we've got a lot of insights and tools to be able to help you track all of that wealth inside the platform.
Yeah. And so let's dive into it, because I know basically what Ben's just spoken to you about are questions that have popped up. How do I track my balances? How do I look at my property portfolio plan against my actuals? All of that. That is exactly what this next 45 minutes is going to cover.
So here's just a snapshot. The best part about Moorr is it's free to use. It's available on web app and also on your mobile device. Now, the way in which we're designing it, the mobile is the on the go. So MoneySMARTS is on the go with you everywhere. All of the sort of more rich, more technical stuff, we're using the web app as part of that. Now, we'll continue to build out features across both platforms. And beautiful thing is, I use the example that if I logged into my internet banking, I've got a web version. And if I logged in my internet banking on my mobile, I've got the mobile version as part of that particular story. So no different. Your data's the same across all of that. It's fully secure. It's fully protected. You've also got two-factor authentication around that particular story.
And that answers another question. There was a question there about how secure is the app? What's the level of security? As Ben just explained, it's as high as it can be in the financial world.
Yeah, we're absolutely. I mean, that's the most important layer, is the security layer, because we understand that we're dealing with personal information and we're dealing with personal and financial information. So it becomes really important. In fact, only just before Christmas, we did another what we call penetration testing, where we get an external company to try and hack into our systems and see where our vulnerabilities are. And we got a really nice tick of approval in terms of those penetration tests as part of that. Now, you're always got to keep vigilant on this sort of stuff.
Yep.
There's always areas where you can have vulnerability. So you're always trying to do your very, very best in terms of protecting people's data.
And coming up, who's our product manager of the Moorr app, he will be able to dive into that even more if you need any more updates on that question you gave us before.
Sure. So let's now talk about what are the tools and features of mastering your money. So we've got several in there. We've got a whole area called My Financials, which is really where all of the action happens, the administration happens, the tracking and the recording happens. And then we've got these sets of tools. We've got MoneySMARTS, MoneyFit, and MoneyStretch. And so what do they all mean? So My Financials is the core operating area of the platform, where you do all of that tracking, and you can also do historical tracking. You can go backwards with some of your old budgets and some of your old results as well. Then we've got the MoneySMARTS, which we're talking about here, which is a rules-based money management system. Then we've got MoneyFit, which is where you can compare yourself against your peers across Australia in terms of, we've got thousands and thousands of anonymized records. So obviously you're not knowing who they are, but you're knowing what state they live in, and you're knowing their household composition. You're seeing, what do they spend on groceries? What do they spend on insurances? What do they spend in terms of how they're managing their household affairs? And finally, MoneyStretch is just a really cool but simple but powerful cash flow projection tool. Want to start a family? What about if we did, go down to one wage for whatever reason? We're thinking about that. We're starting to think about those cash flow story there. So they are the tools. Let's jump into MoneySMARTS now. So there's a couple of things I really want to drill home in terms of why we think this is the best money management system in Australia, and that is the foundation principles. It needed to be simple to understand and operate. Tick. It needed to be accurate with good checks and balances. It also needed to be convenience. You needed to save time. We understand that we are time poor. I don't want to spend my whole weekend in terms of just putting in values in all different parts of the platform. All of the integrations happen. All the calculations happen behind the scenes. You put one value in and the machine does all of the heavy lifting and the software does all the lifting for you. Insightful. It needs to give me some indication, opportunities in terms of where I can save. It needs to obviously help me plan better. I've got to think about my goals and start challenging me around those sort of goals. It needs to help me improve my decision making. So things like 7-day float, which you're about to learn about, how does that help me make better decisions in terms of my unconscious overspending that we absolutely get to do these days with tapping and going? In terms of controlling my money instead of it controlling me. We mentioned that before, is one of the most psychologically powerful things. If you've got control over your money and you're not going to make irrational decisions, you've already got half the battle won. Then you obviously were talking about helping maximize that surplus money. That's that annual targeted cash flow that we're talking about. And then we want to work, for individuals and households. So can it work for your son who's just started his first job at McDonald's or Hungry Jack's? Yes, it can. And it can also work for people who are just managing their cash flows in their 80s and 90s. So it can work for those households or individuals as well. And most importantly, it is a rules-based system, which we're going to get to very shortly in terms of what that looks like. So those operating principles and rules are these. These are important to understand. How we've built it is it's operating within a 12-month window. Okay, now that's not saying that those 12 months is a locked period. And that's the biggest problem with most budgeting spreadsheets is like, okay, that's my 12 months and I can't make it integrate, or I can't look back and I can't look forward. So it does have a 12-month operating window, but it has, as we say, with our ASATs or our historical tracking and the ability to put backdated data in, you can actually, put data in from 1971 if you wanted to, in terms of how the system will work. So obviously how it works is it's got budgeted, or what we call expected income. So when you're playing with it, this is not the actual number. This is the budgeted number over that 12 months that you expect to receive from an income point of view. And the same applies for the expenditure of the money going out. Now, in terms of its operating structure, we have a classifications layer. We have an items layer, which is where really most, say, banking apps and other competitive apps in this space in finance, they stop there. And in fact, they have really limited, in some cases, they might have only 20 items or 20 categories. And that's it. So you're like, I can't really see and get down for those people who want to get down. Now, financial cards, this is the next layer that we've introduced. It's the new layer that's been around for around sort of 12 to 18 months now, but it just allows you to tailor it. So you can go very deep, or you can just keep it simple in terms of what we're doing as well.
And what you should be seeing from what Ben's putting up on screen for you right now, Ben is pointing out that basically you're building your own personal profit and loss statement.
Correct.
Right. And you are just itemizing each parts of the profit that you've got coming in and the losses that you've got going out. And that also means you're building a balance sheet. You're building your assets, you're building your liabilities, and your P&L that comes with that, and how that plays into your balance sheet. I know that sounds a little bit sort of boring and accounting, but that's what you do with your Excel spreadsheets. It just takes so much time to do it, and it's likely that you're going to get the calculations wrong. This does all that for you. You've just got to put it in and understand that going granular, which is again why you've got items, and then you've got the financial cards, just gives you that even more financial understanding of where you sit. And when you have more understanding, more informed decisions, better habits, better outcomes.
Well said, well said. And then obviously, like anything, you need a banking structure. So you need to be able to make sure, we're not going to keep all of our money on our pillow, or like our grandparents did. They kept them in flower jars and so forth. As part
buried in the ground.
Or buried in the ground. So we're going to talk to you and introduce you to the concept of a primary account. And then also these, what we call the virtual jars. So we're going to take inspiration from our grandparents in terms of how they did put money into the groceries jar, into a bills jar, and into a savings or an emergency fund jar. We are absolutely going to be talking about those behavioral principles, but in a digital age where we're becoming more and more as a cashless society, we need to move with the times and use all of these powerful tools available to us, but still take the proven principles that we would have learned from our grandparents in terms of that. We're going to introduce you to what's called a 7-day float, or our living and lifestyle account. And then, of course, if you're feeling really comfortable as a money manager, you also potentially will have a credit card account, which is where we look at doing our bills as a way of keeping our money in our offset account or in our savings account, and taking advantage of the auto sweep and the up to 55-day interest-free policy that might be available on some of the better credit cards, as opposed to the traditional now going back down to 44 days. We're seeing some of those changes come through.
And again, the reason for this, all of our money is working for us at all points in time. Because if we have more money sitting in our offset, more of that therefore is working against your home loan, allowing you to save more, pay down your principal faster, and away you go.
Yeah.
That's what it's for.
And then we've got some other important rules. So we've got what we call regular spending, which is our day-to-day spending. Now, the design of the system meant that you didn't have to track your regular spending. Like, everyone thinks, oh God, budget, I'm going to have to, every dollar that I spend, I'm going to have to track that in terms of what that looks like. That's not where we want to be here. So you've got irregular spending and you've got regular spending as part of that. Now, the design of that and the principle there means that as you get up and running, we're going to say to you that it shouldn't take more than 10 minutes a month, where effectively you grab your bank statement and you grab your credit card statement, and then we just quickly do a run through of those, and then you'll be able to be up to speed and know that you've kept your books in order as part of that particular story. So
we're not here to tell you to keep all your Woolies and Coles receipts and enter every single one.
No.
We do not want you doing that.
Definitely do
That's
not want you doing that.
And not only that, if you're tracking down to the dollar and cents, it actually will get away from your overall thinking because you become so fixated on that number that you'll actually lose the holistic approach. And Ben's coming to a minute. The one thing you'll hear me harping on about in the next 20 minutes over and over, holistic, whole wealth, whole design. Dollars and cents is not the aim of the game.
No. Okay, so let's have a look at it in a diagram sense. So effectively, we've got our money in, and that money in is in these jars. So we have the living and lifestyle jar, the credit card jar, the direct payments, so the direct debits jar, the provisioning jar, the surplus, and also the loans jar. And so I was saying it earlier, every dollar that's coming in has already technically been allocated for the next 12 months. Of course, you have some flexibility around that, but the point being is it's already allocated. So if it's not going to be spent, it's going to be in savings.
Yep.
I'm going to have it in that surplus jar that we were talking about before. Now, this is how it all comes together. So let's grab the mouse and sort of hover over here. So we've got a primary account. Now, technically, for a lot of people, you only need one. Okay, if other people have multiple offsets in some of their, with the banker that they're the lender or the banking institution that they're banking with, sure, you can obviously create little side accounts, Christmas funds, and a few other things. But in theory, there's money coming into just that one account. Now, what's happening from there is that you will see money will be sent out to the living and lifestyle jar. That's the 7-day float. So every 7 days, a transaction will be automated and it'll move money into your living and lifestyle jar. Okay, and that's where you will have a debit card attached to this bank account here, and you can even get cash out of an ATM. I don't know why you would, but you could in terms of that. And then obviously that's what you're buying for your regular goods and services spending. In addition to that, you can have the credit card, and the credit card will have a limit consistent with around the bills, the monthly bills that you're paying. We do not spend living and lifestyle spending. This is the rule on the credit card. The credit card is just there for your bills. Okay, so you never overpay on your bills. You pay the exact amount of the bill that's owing. So that's why the credit card becomes valuable, because obviously we have to keep the money in the savings account or in the offset account. Then you've got the direct payment. So that's just, okay, it doesn't make sense to pay on the credit card because of the surcharges. So rather than that, I'm just going to set a direct debit coming out of that primary account. Then you've got the loans jar. Now the loans can be different types: mortgages, personal loans, car loans, investment loans. So we know there could be multiple ones of those, but the repayment amount is coming from that primary bank account. And then finally, we've got the provisions jar. Now the provisions jar, again, you can pay with the credit card or you can pay direct, whatever that looks like in terms of, but the provisions jar, the rule here is the provisions jar is the jar in which you track your expense card items. Okay, so if you want to track everything you spend in that card, then we've got a provision for you to do that. So that sort of sets the scene.
Let's do an example.
Yeah. So these are the frameworks. Remember I said financial classifications? They live under income, expenditure, assets, and borrowings. Okay. Then we've got the financial items. So there are around 48 of those that we have. So we have a very extensive list in terms of those financial items. So we're doing all the decision making for you in terms of, oh, what am I going to name this card or whatever? That will give you a guide in terms of what it looks like. Then we go into the financial cards, which is new. So outside of the original book that we put together, this is giving the additional layer. So the Make Money Simple Again book, I see that down the bottom, which is this book here. So this book here, we didn't have the financial cards. We kept it simple, but we got feedback from our thousands of users who are saying, geez, I'd like to go a little bit more deeper in terms of tracking some of those items. So in this particular case, you can see under digital subscriptions, I can now set up a Spotify, a Foxtel, a Disney, a Netflix, a KO, and I can break them all down to see exactly how my spending is going into those financial cards. So that's the scene setting. That's setting up the framework. That's setting up the rules. And that's setting up the principles that are associated with MoneySMARTS. Hopefully, it's a no-nonsense money management system that you're going to be able to run in 10 minutes in a day. So I'm ready to set up and start getting into our demos. So here we go now. we're going to show you, you can see this is how you would set up your original Moorr account. So this is where you get to create your free account. So you can see the QR code on the side there. If you've got your mobile phone, hover over that and you can onboard via the mobile version. Obviously, you can see the onboarding via the web version is very similar. You sign off on that. You can put your Face ID security on your mobile version, and then you're basically going into getting started with onboarding. Now, one of the things you also need to remember is we're getting, obviously, an email will go out to you, which will validate your email. Why do we need a validated email?
Again, it gets back to that question we came before, the security behind it. We need to know it's you. We also need to make sure we get your two-factor authentication up, all of the areas then. And then don't forget, this is also about giving you the insights that you want. The email system is there to give you an updated prompt to say, hey, we haven't seen you for a while, or XYZ has changed in your scenario. You need to get onto the app and have a good look, or go onto the website and have a good look.
Yeah, so there's a lot of spam emails going through these sort of email postal portals. And so if they don't know that you want to have a relationship with it, they might block it, send it to your junk and so forth. So by validating that email address, you're telling the postmaster, yep, I want to receive emails, because ultimately what's going to happen is if there's any updates or any changes to terms, we'll be able to communicate that to all of the people who have an account created. Okay, the other thing we also want to introduce you to is our Smart Assistant. And so this is Opti. Now, Opti has been built into the platform, and Opti is going to get smarter and smarter into the future with AI. And we've got really big plans over the next 3 to 5 years in terms of what we're going to do in terms of teaching Opti to be your personal money management system. So that's just a look into the future. But for now, it's just going to guide you through some of the processes in terms of being able to set up.
And why do we call him Opti?
Short for optimization. So that's exactly what we think about in terms of sequencing your money, planning your money, and making sure that your money's working harder for you. So whenever you do get, say, an email from Opti, or you get a notification from Opti, usually that's designed to sort of say, hey, we can save your time, save your money, or make your money.
Yep.
Normally, if you're getting other general emails from the Moorr team, from myself and the Moorr team, that's just more general information. But whenever Opti shows up, you normally know it's got something to do with an opportunity for you to be in a better financial position. So keep an eye out for him or her or it being a virtual assistant. All right, so now we're going to talk about the stages. So you can see we've got the tracking in terms of the steps to be able to get into here. And we like to start with, well, plan to become what you plan to become. So this is the first area where you can start to create some goals. And what we know what goal habit behaviors do, when you put them down, when you write them down, or when you record them, what's the probability of being able to then focus on achieving those goals?
Yeah, because you're creating habit. So, I mean, we are all about property. So the investment goal here is to get an investment property.
Yep.
So the run through now, as Ben said, let's look at that 12-month rolling scenario that Moorr gives you, so that we can start looking at what the budgeting has happened for our imaginary people, which we've got coming in here at the moment, which is Chris and Sarah Moorr, excuse the pun. But this will show you how you start to set up your goal and how you start to set up the cards that Ben's run through, because that's really important here. Is that, again, it's asking you all of those questions, and now we're into the assets. You're going through all of them. And this is what I want you to look at. Top right corner, have a look at that assets value. Currently it's sitting at $0. As this goes by, watch it roll up, because you're putting in your bank account. You're putting in your second bank account. You're putting in your home assets. You're putting in your super. You're putting in your car. And every other asset that you own gets collated all in one spot immediately. And just as I said, as this runs through, remember those assets that you probably just don't think about. What is my super? Like, how often do you check your superannuation balance? Almost never. How much do you look at all those different bank accounts as a whole? Probably never. Again, this is designed to put it all in one place for you. And you can see already we're at 830,000. We haven't finished. We haven't put in, Sarah's super yet. What is the combined income? It's already 7 figures.
So it's a really powerful tool to be able to then start to think about that. And we start with assets first, because if we've got investment assets, usually we've got potential income coming off those investment assets. We've got potential some costs associated, and we might even have some debt associated with those if we're thinking about an investment property solution. So that is really important. The next thing we're going to be focusing on is obviously the borrowings. So you can see a theme here in terms of we can name the card. So we give you that tailored ability to name the card. You can choose the type of borrowing option it is, the provider. The other critical things here are around the frequencies. So when you do certain repayments, sometimes even with your expenses, sometimes they get the repayments wrong, and that can potentially get your calculations wrong.
And you can see who it's for.
Correct.
Right? So this loan is tied to Home Sweet Home.
Yep.
So you can see they're all tied together, which borrowings is working in which asset and so on and so forth. Again, the credit card, that's we talked about before, about those nominal, consistent spending areas that's revolving through it. So all of it has a link.
And it's really important to make sure from a purpose point of view that you understand what that is, because there's a tax consequence if it's for investment purposes or it's for owner-occupier purposes. And then again, another great example of all of the calculations being done in the background. Anything around your payment frequencies. If you want to do it weekly, we'll do all the calculations for an annual projection. All of those things are being done by the system as part of that particular story. Then we're getting into, obviously, the income side of it. So at this stage, we want to make sure that we've got the income coming in. And again, gross income, we'll do all the magical calculations. If you've already got investment properties, all of those tax calculations are getting done behind the scenes as part of getting your income set up. And I think that's also important. And OPI comes in and says, okay, just start with the main income for now. We can come back and sort of tailor as we add some of those other assets. We can put other incomes in later.
Yep.
Then we're going into obviously the area that does take the longest, because what we are trying to do is get some level of accuracy. It does not have to be down to the $10 or even the cents. It just needs to come in here. Now, what you're also seeing happening in here, if I was to sort of just hold this and just go back, I'll just see if I can hover over one of these points and I'll get, so there we go. Oh, no. There. See where it's got the plus and the minus button. If I want to create multiple cards under that item, I just tap, tap, tap on the plus button, and I want 3 of those. So remember the digital subscriptions, if I've got multiple. But if I just want to keep it simple to start with and just run at the item level, I can do that as well. That's the magic of the tailored system.
Correct. And that probably answers the question that just came in from Blake of how do I manage ad hoc spending on things like groceries.
Yep.
If you want to go to that granular level and actually add in that ad hoc thing, as you can see on here at the moment, you've got general living, personal care, groceries and non-alcoholic beverages. Well, actually that ad hoc area, I need to take that up because it was, I don't know, for a party or whatever it happens to be. You can add that in by clicking that plus, and it's my regular grocery spending and my ad hoc spending now falls in there as well.
That's exactly right. Now, I'll just go back there. I must have just jumped a little bit ahead of myself. So I'm just going to hit play again on this. I'm just going to go back to where we are here. Now, I'll just pause on that. Let's just get a pause on that. Right. So what we're seeing here, you've selected the cards, all right? The system's now put them into an easy table for you to go and complete those cards. So you're bulk editing here as part of and bulk updating. So essential and discretionary is really important. So in some cases, when you are looking at some of these, like see the digital subscriptions, completely discretionary. You're not going to live or die based on, the discretionary spending that you're doing on your digital subscriptions. And then you can see here, here's the MoneySMARTS chart. This is where the magic's happening behind the scenes. What we've done as part of we've defaulted the correct MoneySMARTS jar. So you don't even have to think about that, but you can override it. Okay, so you can see there for furniture, we've got a $500 provision for furniture and a $300 additional discretionary amount. And so that's done under provisioning. Now that's a yearly figure that we put in there. So if you want to understand what's that as a monthly cost, you can see it there. But if that means I've set that up, so I'm tracking that, because guess what? That's irregular spending. It's not a regular spending item. So let's play this out, because we're going to get into the further demos in a moment. You can see this all then plays all of those items out. We've also categorized them under general living, under living and lifestyle. So you can see all of those particular based on the selection that you made as part of the onboarding program. And you can see you're almost there in terms of the ticks across the top. So the profile is ready to go. and then we introduce you inside to the main platform. We're going to get to that in a quick moment when we look at that dashboard. But then ultimately, what has happened now is we've created all of these financial cards. So the name of the financial card is here. The item layer is noted here. And of course, as you can see with some of the frequencies, you've also got the frequencies here. And then you've got the money, the virtual jar that we've allocated all the different items into. All that work done for you, okay, in terms of what that looks like. So we're now going to jump into some of the, this is the bit I love the most because we're live and interactive.
Yep.
So we're going to jump into the dashboards. So let me see if I can get this this moving across. So we'll go and have a look at this dashboard. So let's go up to the home page. So now we're live inside the platform. And so we can see we've met Sarah and Chris. We can see that they've got 240,000. You want to take us away, Ev?
Yeah, so that's the annual income. And so I think what we need to also remember here is that when we show these numbers, that annual surplus cash flow is after everything, right? It's after tax. It's after paying out the interest. It's after all of the expenses that they've budgeted for. That annual surplus of $54,000 is really impressive. And whatever you're starting at, in the end, when you see that middle box particularly, it's the one that I always look at really closely, because the bigger it is, the better obviously you're doing. But even if it means that you're only doing $2,000 a year, you've got a goal to build towards. I want to make that 2,000 into 10,000. I want to make that 10,000 into 50, or whatever your goals are. Because again, it shows the annual income, 240,000 for a household. Yep, that's pretty reasonable. It's slightly above the Australian average. But in saying that, across the whole portfolio there, you can see exactly what it's doing and where all the assets are working for and against them. And again, what we're now coming to is you've got Sarah and Chris's P&L, their profit and loss. You can see Sarah's income, where it all comes from, the tax that she's going to pay, the total net position she gets out of all of that, the monthly breakdown that she has, because in the end, we know that's what you want. You want to understand for the next 4 weeks, my money comes in and then my money goes out, and what happens in between. And that's why this is so important. So you've also got in there your 7-day float. All those things are inside that. And it shows you that you're making $4,500 a month. I mean, that's really impressive. Think about
that's trapping $4,500
a month.
A month.
And when you start thinking of it in that amount of money, abundance, right? It creates confidence. I'm making $4,500 net, free of everything.
Save me money, then put my money to work.
Yeah.
That's ultimately how you're going to create the wealth base that you need for a very, very financially peaceful retirement.
Correct. And again, as I said to you with the asset building, the holistic view of this, because this is taking everything that's going in to your accounts, not just your income, but goes in through your supers. All those things are created through this one platform scenario. Going back.
Okay, so there we go. So that's the home page. So you're going to get blessed with that particular bit of information that's coming through on the home dashboard. Remember, this is the web version. On the mobile version, you're getting all of these other rich insights around cash position, debt position, those types of things as well.
Questions are coming, guys. We love it. So we will get to them as we can. And I'll try and make sure we integrate them into it as we go along, because there's still several things that you're asking that I promise you are about to get to.
Okay, so now that was the home dashboard. Let's move on to what we call the banking setup. So the banking setup is really important to understand so you get this right, because effectively the My Financials area, that is the core. So, and MoneySMARTS is now just basically a tool that's built in there. So you don't even have to run MoneySMARTS if you don't want to. We encourage you to do it because it's rule-based and it keeps you accountable, but you don't have to, because effectively all the cards, all the insights, all those calculations are being done in the primary area under the My Financials tab. So we can see here, remember we talked about all the income coming into one environment. So in this particular case, obviously Mary and John, so it's not Sarah and Chris, but it's just an example that we've used in terms of teaching our advisory business. And so you can see we've got those joint accounts. Then you've got the auto weekly transfer to the living and lifestyle. Then you've got the auto sweep payment into the credit card. And then you've got all these loans. So this is what a classic environment might look like once you're set up. So let's jump now in to the platform itself and have another look. So let's go into the what we call the card tray. So we can go in through here, or a little tidbit, you can actually spin the cards around where you can look at them sideways if you want to, by just using this little hamburger button here. So in this particular case, we want to basically have a look at the banking. So I can go in and I can see here that this is the home loan, the home offset account. Now, in my case, I call this my primary account. So I do let people know that's my primary account. And then you can see here where it says primary bank account. So if I wanted to make that my primary bank account, I would then click on that. And so that is telling the system that that is the primary account in terms of how I'm going to be operating my MoneySMARTS system. So I'd click on that and say, okay, that's my primary account. If I've got secondary and tertiary bank accounts that are associated with that and I want to do a multi-account level, I can do that. Okay, so I can absolutely add more of those in there. So let's now move into MoneySMARTS for the first time. And what I'm going to show you down here in terms of the monthly checkup, so remember 10 minutes a month is all we're looking at here, is if I click on this button here, it's going to give me a choice to say, which ones do I want to use as my primary account? Now, here's an important tip. If your living and lifestyle account is not a sub-offset account, so in other words, if the lending institution and you have a mortgage and you are looking at running that as an offset, so if you've got multiple offsets, then all you need to do is you click that button and that will also be added into our calculations when we do our monthly checkup. Okay, so if you don't want to keep that in the calculations, in other words, it's not an offset account, then I would not necessarily be tracking the living and lifestyle. I'll just be tracking the home loan account. And then you can see I do have the credit card set up. So they're ultimately the statements or the transactions that I'm going to check against that. So I'm just going to hit confirm in terms of what I've just done. And that's now changed those situations over there. If I had it turned off this one, and I went back into that card, so I can click over from here into that card, and you can see if I had to turn that off, it would have turned it back on, etc., based on those instructions that I can also do. So here we are in terms of I've confirmed that. And so we've obviously prepared this one earlier, and you'll see at the top here, it says the current MoneySMARTS period. That's only because we've put 12 months of data in here for this demonstration purposes. So that won't necessarily pop up for you. But you can see your money in, you can see your money out, and there's that targeted surplus we saw on the home dashboard. And let's have a look. Okay. Oh, okay. This is the PAYG card, and that's the PAYG card for both Chris and also, I get it. I can see the relationship.
Mm-hmm. And just to jump in here, because this is a question that's come from Ronnie.
Yep.
How do I distribute money for a sole trader? Again, when you do the drop-down clicks, you can choose that, right? So you've got PAYG, you've got sole trader, you've got all of those options when you do the input. Now, being aware, again, your sole trader, you're going to get gross income. You're not actually getting some form of a PAYG scenario. So your tax scenario, you need to tell them that's obviously the case.
Correct. So this is built for the household. So if you are a sole trader, then in terms of if you're claiming your business expenses as part of your personal expenses, that needs to be included. But if you're trying to separate out your business activities from your household financials, then it's really important that we only put the income that we're receiving into the household, not the business. Like, if you run a business, you're going to get the P&L and balance sheet associated with that business. That's separate. We're only interested in the gross income that's coming into the household that's available for us in our lifestyle. So that's a really important point.
And Ronnie out there, I'm a sole trader. So I know exactly what you're asking, why you're asking it. You've just got to do that a little bit more work, but I promise you, it still filters in like this. And as Ben said, this is designed to look at the personal business household, if you want to look at it that way. What is the personal household doing rather than the integration of your life, of your business, and the life of your overall personal scenario?
And so remember, we talked about money in and we talked about money out. So with these little arrow toggles, I can now have a look at those in terms of, okay, what are all the cards as part of that particular story? So so you can see those in both. And then the magic of the system is we've actually broken those down based on, remember, these are all the virtual jars. So you can see here, This is the monthly money in through the primary account, and then there's the money going out. So you can see the money going out to the living and lifestyle jar, the 7-day float. You can see the money going out to the credit card jar. You can see the direct payments. You can see the loan payments and any money that we've provisioned to anticipated to go out on a monthly basis. So 12 months divided by the 12 monthly periods, that's what that's adjusting for.
And what's fascinating particularly about this, right? You can see that mathematically that there. So, $7,500 each, roughly round about 15 grand total. It's just less than that. Total expenditure, $10,000. A lot of people don't realize how much their expenditure is.
Yes.
Right? Particularly per month, because once you start factoring in credit card payments, once you factor in your loan repayments, and then also your lifestyle, adds up real quick. That's exactly what this is designed to do, is to show you that even with $10,000 of expenditure, that you are seeing very clearly that Chris and Sarah are still well and truly ahead on their monthly surface scenarios.
Okay, and so then what we've got is the living and lifestyle. This is that 7-day float. We've done the hard yards, and we're telling you how much that allocation should be on a weekly basis. So if you're familiar with some of the teachings that we've done in the past, we always encourage people to pay themselves on the Thursday, going back to how our grandparents used to get the cash. They used to put it in the jars. Well, that was the money you could spend. So do it on the Thursday. And this is what it covers. It covers all of the regular spending. So when we were talking about discretionary groceries, there shouldn't really be discretionary groceries. It should be essential. And then if I want to have a little bit of play money in terms of maybe some confectionery or some ice creams or something like that, that's the little bit of money that you potentially can juggle around. But of course, obviously, the essential things we need are shelter, food, and clothing. So that is part of that. So there's the groceries, there's the dining and takeaway. So by doing the grocery shop so whatever day you do your big grocery shop, that's the day you should be setting for that money to arrive in the account, because this is where we stop unanticipated spending or irregular spending. We want to stop that in terms of that unconscious spending. So if I then so let's use the Thursday example. Bought my groceries, got everything under control, got a haircut that day or whatever it is, and then I've got my sporting things happening on the weekend. I actually enjoyed myself. Went for a few beers afterwards or whatever that looks like. So all of a sudden now, ultimately, I've only got $20 left, and it's Tuesday, and I've got to get through. So that's when I open the pantry, because what most people do, they'll go and take their phone and they'll tap at a 7-Eleven or a convenience store or just buy some extra groceries or whatever, but not using what already they have. So the idea is to train you to try and stop that unconscious spending, as part of that particular program. So
and that's part of, again, that ad hoc spend. This is not just putting in a scenario of this is what I do. This is the budget that I also have.
Beautiful. And now we've got the bills payment. So remember, only bills on credit cards. We don't do any discretionary or lifestyle spending on credit cards. That will get us into trouble because we're spending the bank's money that we haven't allocated. That dollar wasn't allocated. It's not your money to spend, and yet we go out and spend it. And that's when we get into trouble with credit card debt. So just your bills, get into a regular routine that'll auto sweep itself out as part of that particular story. Then we get into direct payments, and you saw earlier we didn't have any, so there's nothing in here. But if you wanted to set a direct debit up because the credit card fees are excessive and it would make more sense to direct debit pay.
Council rates.
Exactly. Perfect example. Then we've got the loans jar. So we can see here we've got the home loan repayment going out and the credit card that we can see in here as well. And then we've got the provisions jar. We'll spend a couple of minutes in provisions jar. And thanks to obviously Rick, our product manager, who put this example together. This is life. This is living. So even though you can see here that there was, say, by way of example, presents and gifts, $750, I'm $729 over. So he has made a judgment call, or Sarah and Chris, I should say, have made a judgment call in terms of they've overspent a little bit on that particular thing, but they've underspent in some other areas. So they might have had a good year from a medical and health point of view. Mm-hmm. So they haven't had any doctor's trips, or they haven't had any of those types of things. So this is where you do get to track. So if you want to, let's have a look at all of this list here, right? You can see the list. Let's go into the card tray. Let's go into our expenses. And let's say I want to turn dining and takeaway out of my living and lifestyle And I did this for Jane and I because we started spending a bit too much for dining takeaway. I'm now going to change that and turn that into a provision jar. And so by just that one stroke inside here, and if I close that down and I move back into MoneySMARTS, and you can see here in terms of, where is it? The dining takeaway. Right, let me just refresh this. Come on.
Technology. It's
All right, let's go back in here now. It's just playing a little bit of catch up for us.
So while we're waiting for this to load, because obviously we are doing this on internet speeds that are having a bit of fun, there's a few questions that I think sort of come into it that I want to ask. One of them was platform integration, real-time updates from financial institution and other platforms.
Yes.
Yes or no? That's a question coming from Ben.
Sorry, I missed that. I was too busy.
Does platform integration in real-time updates come from financial institutions and other platforms?
So if you're talking about open banking or bank feeds, not at the moment, but we're beginning that work literally in February. And so we hope, but this year we will have that opportunity to be able to connect all of your transaction banking and feed that directly into here.
Yep. Now we probably have got that all fixed up and done. So that now looks like it is there.
I'm just going to try and make sure that it did save across. It is showing under the provisions jar. But it's the date.
Yep.
So the reason why it's not showing up is because the date order is back in that old previous period.
And the reason I wanted you to do that, another question that's come in before, which I think came from SAF, which is about, I'm having a bit of problems with regards to the incomes expenditure versus my annual surplus. It seems unconscionably high.
Yep.
It's probably because of things like this.
Yes. Well, that's the non-tracking or basically the unconscious overspending that people are doing as part of that particular story. So that's an interesting one. Now, I'm going to start moving through because I'm conscious of time. We'll get to some more of those questions at the end because we're going to bring Elric in. But the reason, just quick one here, you can see that everything's date stamped in here, right? And that's important. So because that time period finished on the 16th of January is the reason why the dining and takeout isn't actually showing up in the provisions chart. But in quick terminology, when we go into here and I want to record a transaction, I can simply go in here, I can hit the add spending button, I can tap away, I can put the value, I set the date, and I can just save that particular transaction. So that just gives you an idea in terms of if you want to track, you can. If you want to track every one of your expense cards, be my guest, but that's not a time saver. The whole idea of this particular program is to not have to do that. All right. So what we've just done there now, we've jumped ahead in terms of some of those other items. So I'm just going to go back in and go to the PowerPoint presentation. We'll go down. So what we've just looked at, we did look at the surplus target. We looked at the jar breakdown. We did look at the 7-day float in terms of what that is. And then we just had a look at that provisional spending. So we've jumped ahead a little bit there in terms of getting all of that demonstration done as part of the MoneySMARTS area. Let's have a look at what's next. We've got the flexible start date and also the insights and reporting. So let's jump back into the live version. And what I mentioned to you before in terms of when we're inside these cards, this is the magic of the system I was telling you about. So if I wanted to do a change to say my dining and takeout, so you can see if I wanted to change that value to $150, so I can do that here, and I can then set the date in terms of when I want that to potentially begin with, right? And remember, that's the budgeted estimate that I'm potentially going to make. I'm going to clear that anyway, but you'll see effectively what I've done. Now, also the other thing that you can see in here, when you do go up into these particular as-at dates, we have what's called historical change log. So coming back to questions we had earlier around being able to put in all that historical stuff, I can get in here and I can also go and put historical target. Now, remember, this is not the actual result you got. This is the expense item, the budgeted target that you were looking at getting as opposed to the actual results. When we introduce transactions, those transactions, you will start to see budgeted versus actual in terms of that tracking mechanism right across all of your financial cards, as well as part of that particular thing. The other thing I wanted to then quickly show you is the insights and reporting. So what you can see here, which is really terrific, is you can see the power of how you're performing. Now, Ulrich, as part of the demonstration for Sarah and Chris, did something really clever here, just for illustration purposes. We all know that not all of our bills land beautifully over our 12-month period. So ours got an enormous amount of expense happening in the very first month. And so if you were doing a budget at home, you'd think, I'm going to give up on this. I'm miles behind. You can also see in terms of the yearly provision, in that first month, he spent $5,899 for that household. And so you would rock up on month one and be going, oh my God,
I'm already down.
I'm already down. Remember, a 12-month window allows you, and the 12-month budgeting program, you can then see, well, because I booked that holiday as part of that provisional spending, and that's what the bulk of this is. So it's a big spend for a holiday, but everything else, that dollar was allocated, and it just happened that it came out early. But the rest of that 12-month period, it's just going to even itself out because every dollar had a job to do. So I was expecting to spend that big amount on the airfares and the accommodation package. So I've paid that in month one. That's blown out my monthly provision spend, but it hasn't blown it out because I planned for it. It's in my budget. When I was looking at my provisioning jar, so I go up here and I can have a look at, my holiday spend. So I go and have a look at holidays. And so I can open that one up and you can see, basically what happened. I spent $3,500 in planning for that trip as part of that particular story. So that's ultimately how it's all going to play itself out in terms of where that spending will show up. All of these graphs are all done behind the scenes. Then you can start looking at your accumulated actual surplus. So, and this is sort of what's happened in real world. Remember, this is the target we were going after. Now, in the example that Al's put together here, we didn't quite get to that full target, but we did pretty well. That was 53. We got to 46. So we've made some decisions throughout the course of the year where maybe it was a weekend, a hell yeah moment or whatever it was.
And the other thing to point out there, that is lifestyle by design. That still gave Chris and Sarah their opportunity to say yes to the things they wanted to say yes. Okay, they didn't achieve their surplus budget.
Yep.
But their lifestyle by design meant that they could actually say yes to things when they needed to.
And their savings account did continue to keep going higher because we were trapping, most of the time, we were trapping that $4,500 a month. And you can see here that we always talk about swimming between the flags. So ultimately, you can see, in terms of what happened around monthly excess surplus, and there were some months we did really well, but there was some, and so the trend line here was that we did overspend a little bit more than we expected. And we think that happens in most households. So don't beat yourself up about it in terms of, because that again is a decision that you've made and a judgment call around, actually, we didn't budget for it, but we're going to do it.
And we still made money.
And we still
got a surplus.
Correct. And we still want to start thinking about putting that money to work for us. So that is a good little example in terms of the power of using those insights and reports to continue to keep believing in the way in which you've set up your system and how it's running. Now, I want to give you a couple of quick tips in terms of some other little demos. So let me just quickly go back into the system. And you can see here, when I go into my financials, you can see a few things across the top here. If I want to do some bulk editing, I can obviously go in here and I can do some bulk edit or bulk add. And so you can see all these items here. I can then change, rather than having to go one card at a time where it can be really slow. And if I have the same sort of thing, if I then want to say, you know what, for my next annual rollover or whatever I want to do, I'm going to break out a few more of these sort of things. So let's go to those digital subscriptions again. So I click on that. Oh, there I am adding some of those extra ones. And so I can also add them or I can delete them as part of that particular thing. So I can obviously cancel or create. So that is the bulk add, bulk ed feature. In terms of the card layout, there is some really powerful information that we can also track in terms of, the types of property. So let's go and have a look at the home sweet home. So here's my property. I've got these beautiful insights. So you can now start to see some of the tracking of the value of that home growing over time. So when I hover over those data points, you can see the change in value from the day that I bought that. Now, if this just happened to be an investment property, I can also do some rental analysis on that particular property in terms of what I'm asked to see whether I want to confirm that, but I would be able to then obviously do those property analysis as part of that particular story as well.
Which I think was a question we had before as well. So.
Yeah, so we got some great property analysis. The same sort of thing, if I want to track my dining and take every one of these will have insight. So anytime you put data in, it'll basically track that data over historical periods of time. And I can also then sort by 12 months, 2 years, or maximum periods of time as part of that particular story. Now, I mentioned earlier around the historical tracking. So that is the one that, let's go back in and sort of say, I do want to track that home sweet home. So if I wanted to change the value of that property, I simply can go in here and make the value as at today. But you can see all of the historical data points when I have run some analysis on that property, and I've just recorded the value in that. And that comes back to the balance sheet and also the profit and loss statement calculations that are all free and able to be used as part of the platform. So that is what we call the backdating and the historical tracking that we're able to do. And the final one that I just want to give you a glimpse of is when you go into the wealth dashboard, you can also start to see, some of the powerful components that are associated with it. So we've got the wealth tracker, so you can see how that wealth is going. You can also move that to your net worth breakdown. So you can start hovering over these things and seeing some of the breakdowns of what it is. And you can also, change that date period in terms of the analysis of when you want to have a look at that, and a couple of other nice little insight widgets there. Again, I won't talk to you about Wealth Clock and Wealth Speed, but I highly recommend you go to the main website, moorr.com.au, and put in / Wealth Speed or Wealth Clock, and you'll start to get a rich understanding in terms of all these really powerful instruments that we also have available inside that. So that is a very, very simple beginner's guide into how we manage and set up MoneySMARTS for beginners. We are conscious of time. We're coming up to that hour and a half mark. But are there any more questions? Let's bring Al in. Hopefully we'll do 15 minutes of questions. And this time we'll get Al as the expert person to answer those questions. So thanks for hanging around, Al. That did go, a little bit.
We went perfectly the time, didn't we?
And I'm starting to lose my voice, but that's all good.
Go and have a drink of water.
I will have a little drink of water.
If you are out there, please jump onto the live chat. Please put your additional questions in. I think we've got to a few of them. Al, there was one question before I saw about, inputting from external providers, things like ShareSite and Xero. Can you take through the question there about what can and can't happen with that?
Yes, at the moment, Moorr is a internally integrated system at the moment. So we're not looking to have those features in there immediately in the near future, but certainly things such as integrations with ShareSite and other methods of importing information, such as whether it's through an AI chatbot, as an example, which might help you import statement information and transaction information directly, as well as categorize it. That's something we're looking into deeply, as well as Ben alluded to earlier, open banking in terms of bringing information inwards. But at the moment, there's no external integrations in that sense, in terms of exporting stuff out to Xero, as an example.
You would have seen some of the questions coming through. Is there anyone that has caught your eye that you'd like to address?
Yeah, there's a couple. The first one, I think I wanted to, not necessarily a question, but just, I guess, to sort of sum up, because obviously there's a lot of information to digest, but when it does come to MoneySMARTS, and it's really about getting money on autopilot, after everything's been set up in the platform, realistically, the only two things you really should be tracking are just your living and lifestyle account in terms of the money, and making sure you're not going over what's being spent in that sort of allocation that you're transferring to your debit card, as an example, every week or every 7 days, and the provisions. So everything else in terms of your the stuff that's in your credit card jar, that should automatically be going through. So those are like your regular payments that you're gonna have. Similar to your direct payments, council rates, etc. You want to really try and have that automated as much as possible, and of course your loan payments as well. So realistically, you should be in a state where you're really just tracking transactions that are related to those particular provisions, and those and just keeping an eye on that 7-day weekly float.
And to build on that, Al, when we are talking about why it only takes 10 minutes a month, is because when you do get your bank statement, so you set your start date up, you get your bank statement. At the end of that, all you're doing is putting the balance, the bottom balance of that bank statement in. You're making sure that if it is a provisional expense, that you just adjust for any of the expenditure that you did there, because all of the regular spending we don't need to track. So that was money that was already done. And then you get your credit card and you do the same thing. Make sure there's no transactions on there that you don't understand, and there's been any scams or any expenditure, but that is it. So once you put those two values in and do your provisional spend, you're done.
Yeah.
That's your checkup. So that's why it really only takes that 10 minutes a month as part of that.
Yeah, because your regular spending's there.
Correct.
Right? It's the ad hoc questions we got before, the big out of kilter numbers that you weren't expecting or hadn't budgeted for. They're the ones that need you 10 minutes of time every month, because realistically everything else should be on automation, on autopilot, as Alex said before.
Yeah, beautiful. Al, what else do you got for us?
Yeah, one did catch my eye from Misty, which is basically around the question is I'm having trouble getting my take-home income to match what's in Moorr. Annual surplus is too high compared to my Excel spreadsheet. Does it include tax refunds? So that's actually one of the questions we get commonly through our support center. And in essence, the main reason for that difference is that, as the guys mentioned earlier, the platform is calculated with everything in mind in terms of your annual tax, absolutely everything. When it comes to your take-home pay that you see on your pay slip, that doesn't necessarily factor into account all of the different things that you're going to be having at the end of the year when it comes to doing your tax return. So any sort of deductions that you might, or deductible expenses rather, that you might have that you'll be reporting on, those differences that get calculated during your tax return will be effectively what's going to give you that return, in essence, the money that you get back from the government, or the money that you have to pay. If, let's say, for example, you had a pay rise partway through the year that wasn't factored into the original estimate that was taken as part of your pay slip to pay off the government.
So let's use a common example. Usually a lot of people, if they're out on the road for the work that they do, they might have sunglasses and they're protective eyewear, and they might pay $300 for a good pair of sunglasses to protect a very important asset, which is their eyesight. So that can potentially be tax deductible for some people in terms of the work they do. So to Al's point, and the system won't know that was and you're going to get a tax refund at the end of that. So that's where that imbalance comes in terms of what is actual versus what is targeted. But I think a lot of people also, Al, to that point, broadly think, and that's why we've made some subtle changes to the naming conventions inside some of the cards, and that is where we're talking about budgeted values as opposed to actual values. So when we implement the manual tracking and transactional sort of components to it, all of a sudden they will be able to put those actual values for that against that card, and then ultimately they're going to see a closer look. And then when we do start to introduce that reporting, you'll actually be able to track budgeted versus actual on a potential table format as well. It's just some of the work that Al's been working on in terms of some of the future designs of products that are coming in. Mm-hmm. Al, is there another one on there that you like?
One of the ones that came through earlier was around whether or not you're limited to just tracking the transactions within your provisions, and whether or not you can expand that outside of provisions. And I guess the answer to that at the moment is, the way MoneySMARTS is designed is so that you do only need to track those particular transactions that fall under provisions. Everything else should be on autopilot. However, we are looking to build on and expand the way provisions are reported on and tracked inside the platform in the near future. So we'll be updating things such as the UI and expanding the way that you can actually track transactions. And this goes along the lines of getting to a stage where we can start to have a lot more automated data flowing into the platform in that particular structure, so that you can actually start to see more insights around, exactly how much you spend on this particular category compared to what you expected to spend initially, whether that be a loan, how much you earned as an example as part of your income, or whatever other expense that you can think of.
Beautiful. And then we've got a question here from Blake, basically saying, it would be great to see a forecast with figures. I love the money stretch feature, but it'd be awesome to see that feature built in, in terms of in March, rates are due, my bank will look like this. So Blake, we have started working on those prototypes and potentially giving some of those forward forecasts as dotted lines in terms of the insight reporting that we're also looking at doing. So you would expect that that would be something that that as we start to match actuals versus forecasted or budgeted, you'll start to see some of that sort of capability being introduced into the platform.
Just cognizant of time. If you do have a question, right now is the time to get it in there. Please do, because I think there's probably maybe one or two that Alex got left, and then I think that'll probably be us done. So if you've got a question, please get it into the chat as soon as you can. Any more, Alex, that you caught your attention?
Yeah, I've got this other one from I think it's Bear Buzz. sorry if I got that wrong. But basically it says, how should I treat extra payments into my super? Provision or an expense? So I guess that depends on the nature of that particular transaction. But in essence, under the, I'm not sure if you want to take them into the Moorr platform there under
I'll do that.
Assets. There is the place for you to actually put your estimated contributions to super, whether that be pre-tax or post-tax. So pre-tax being as part of any sort of salary packaging arrangements that you have with your employer, or post-tax, just as soon as it hits your bank account, that's something you want to contribute to your superannuation fund. So you can enter that information in there. You can see there's a space for that, and that effectively would flow through into your MoneySMARTS platform area as well. So that'll be automatically forming part of your calculations too.
And I think it's just important to note that if that is an ad hoc that's actual, that's what, the next phase of the release, which will hopefully be a few months away, we'll be able to sort of say, so you don't really budget for ad hoc, or maybe you did.
And super's a bit different too. It's not an expense or a provision, because it's not an outgoing per se. It's part of your asset building. So it's a bit different in terms of how you think about it as well. You are basically taking cash asset, moving it into an appreciating asset. It will look different, but again, the tax implications are also just making sure that you put it in the right one. So personal contributions, it will obviously be that the taxation on that will be calculated at the end of the financial year. Salary sacrifice is a bit different. So that would be probably my thing to say, just make sure you put it in the right box, but don't think of it as a provision or an expense. It's not that at all.
And I think it's also right to mention here, Al, that if I am doing salary sacrifice, which is effectively taxed at a different tax rate, that the adjustments are also done on the dashboards to factor those tax calculations in.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. So those calculations, the tax.
So again, the system's doing all of that heavy lifting at the back end.
Great question.
You just need to basically put those inputs in terms of what that looks like. There was a question here from, is it SAFJQ? Is that how I would pronounce that?
Yeah.
I recently updated my income and expenditure, but the annual surplus seems unachievable with how high it is. What am I missing? This is what I was saying before about when you are inputting your figures in there. So I always like to then go into the bulk edit feature. And so what I want to do, and this is where some people sometimes get it wrong, is that they might have a figure that is, the frequency is wrong. So they might have a $500 monthly cost, but they've put it at yearly. And that shows that it effectively, if it is $500 a month, that's $6,000 over a year, of course, right? But because they've only put it in as $500 a year, they're missing $5,500 of cost. So usually it comes down to just a little data input error initially in terms of what you put in and the frequency that you've given it. So I always say just double check those. You might find that it's just a simple, honest mistake that you've made in terms of the frequency that you've set up for the value that you put either into essential or discretionary spending.
Any more questions? Ben and I are fairly aware of time that we are over.
Okay, so let's move on then, because we've obviously got a couple of things that we promised some freebies. Al, I want to thank you very much for hanging around and asking some of those questions. There were some other questions that we also wanted to address, which we'll pick up at a later date. And we thank anyone for their feedback. Of course, on the live, if you're loving what you're hearing and you're going to give it a try, let us know in terms of, yep, I've seen enough to give this a try. Because obviously what I'm about to share with you might also encourage you to do that with some of these extra features and things that we want to give to you. So, of course, MoneySMARTS is a rule-based money management system, but we need to learn how to use it. Al's done a series of tutorials that will help you as part of that. There is a section, if you go to the website /MoneySMARTS, you'll also see a lot more of the teachings and training that we've built out to explain more about how to get the best out of MoneySMARTS as part of our system. Now, we also highlighted our book, which is the original sort of playbook associated with running your MoneySMARTS system. And so if you scan that code, you can get that book sent to you immediately. So that'll just allow us to send that book. We'll send it off as a PDF to you. So there's no postage, no handling. You'll get that instantly. And that it really is a user manual for the system that we've set up here. I will flag what I said earlier, which is the fact that the cards, we only went to the items layer in the book. The book is now at least 5 years old, if not more. So ultimately, just remember now that the new My Financials and the card layer just gives you an extra bit of tailorization to be able to do the tailoring that you need. Tailorization, is that a word?
Oh,
I think I've just made up a word at this hour of the day. Okay, and then obviously this is the stuff that really does matter. Transactions, bank feeds, key reminder dates, cash flow Sankey charts, AI agent and Opti in terms of making it smarter and smarter. We're going to build a rich knowledge center in there. For those who love the property story, there's more to have in here, but this is exactly what we were talking before. So this is a little sneak peek in terms of the prototyping that we're doing around how we will potentially track those transactions, and then how we would then measure those transactions against actual numbers. So you can see here actual spending versus targeted or budgeted spending that we're doing, and you can see a little bar chart. So we're experimenting around with what those things may look like as we potentially look to introduce open banking. So that's our concept. In terms of from a property point of view, we've got some rich information coming in around what we want to do to help you manage your property investments and your property portfolio. So they will continue to keep coming along. Certainly the event reminders, I think that's a game changer for me with multiple properties, knowing when I've got, I've got to do gas inspections and safety checks and all of that across the portfolio. In terms of lending structures, how all of that sort of stuff comes up, the budgeted versus actual cash flows, and a rich array of reports that might also be available to me under the professional package that we'll be introducing as part of the property investor suite of tools that we're going to build inside the platform. You can also see in here in terms of, one of the great sort of things, the tax tracker. There's also something that we're looking at doing, and then the research area for looking at for my next investment property. So they're also part of those concepts. So it really is a lifestyle by design story, from cradle to grave is what you want to call it, in terms of we start out to think about our money and our kids and our future, and all of those things are really important. So we have this big vision of all of that in one particular platform, and that's what we started off in telling you about in terms of lifestyle, money, property, and so forth. And finally, some more free stuff, more bonuses. We'd encourage you, if you haven't already heard of the Property Couch podcast, that's where we do talk about property finance and money management. That is an essential listening for anyone serious about understanding the property market in Australia and also managing their finances associated with that. And we also have our property market report, where you can get detailed, rich analysis in terms of all of the moving parts that make up the data set for every suburb in Australia for either houses or units. And those free reports are also available through the QR scan code there. So hopefully those little free bonus offers are enough to keep you interested in terms of checking out those property reports and making sure that you're getting value for the time you spent with us tonight. So thank you very much for watching. On behalf of Evan and myself, we'd like to wish you a good night, and also remember that knowledge is empowering, but only if you act on it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.